In one of my previous videos where I talked about WES evaluation and the process to go about that evaluation, I had a couple of comments and people reach out to me to ask the difference between the WES evaluation versus ICAS, IQAS versus ICAS, ICAS. And that is what I'll be addressing in this video, so stick around. Welcome back. My name is Aku Obi and I help and share my experiences in Canada with international students who are coming here. And I share tips on how to thrive and succeed in Canada as an international student. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the difference between the WES evaluation, the ICAS, IQAS, and the ICAS, which is ICAS. I'll be explaining exactly which one you need, where or when you need it, and how to avoid costly financial mistakes when it comes to these three evaluations. Now, look at this scenario. You got a foreign degree outside of Canada and you're planning to come to Canada to either study or work or come as a permanent resident. However, you need to do something called an Education Credential Assessment. You're confused. Which one should you go for? Does Canada accept this? How much is it going to cost? And all of those questions that fly in your head. The biggest problem is most videos you see online, from YouTube videos to questions on social media platforms on Instagram and Reddit and the likes, address the WES evaluation, which is the World Education Service evaluation. However, they do not talk about the other two and the difference in those three evaluations. They simply don't explain why they prefer WES or why the others are not mentioned. And they fail to also tell you that some provinces specifically require one of the other two. So you pick randomly and end up with the wrong choice. But in this video, I'm going to be saving you from making that costly mistake. What does an Education Credential Assessment ECA even mean? It simply means an official evaluation of your foreign education by a designated organization, which can either be WES, ICAS, or ICAS when it comes to Canada. In plain English, it simply means you are taking your foreign degree from Nigeria, India, or whatever country you're from, and you're telling the Canadian government that, hey, this my foreign degree is equivalent to a Canadian degree of this level. Why does all this even matter? First of all, without your Education Credential Assessment, if you're applying for permanent residency from outside of Canada or even from within Canada, it will reflect in your profile as though you had no post-secondary education, and that could drop your CRS points by up to 100 points. So, you need an Education Credential Assessment to score points for express entry, provincial nomination, even for education requirement verification. For example, some schools require that you have an Education Credential Assessment when you want to apply for your study permits. You should also know that an Education Credential Assessment is valid for 5 years from the day that it was completed. So it's not something that you have to do every year. An Education Credential Assessment isn't just nice to have. An Education Credential Assessment is a mandatory requirement for your permanent residency application, and it also plays a key role in determining your eligibility and immigration points. So having known all that, let's now talk about the three main providers of Education Credential Assessments in Canada. First, the most popular among them is WES, which is the World Education Service. Let's talk about the processing time for WES. Based on data as at March 2026, the WES processing time is 20 business days as soon as your document lands your desk. So the 20 business days starts to count when they receive your transcript and acknowledge that they've received your transcript and your other documents required. Best case that I have seen when it comes to WES is usually 12 weeks, but more realistically, 14 to 16 weeks. These times differ not due to a fault of WES, but because your university or your college sometimes would take a long time to either send your documents or verify. There are times where even when they receive your documents, like your transcripts, WES would also require that you send them a copy of your certificates. Now they'll send a copy, a digital copy of that certificate to your university to verify via email. Sometimes your university can be taking forever to verify that certificate, and they need the transcript and the certificate to go ahead with your evaluation. So because of that time lag, you might experience some delays. Moving on to the cost for WES. WES cost around 267 Canadian dollars for their standard services. Why do people go for WES? Aside being the most popular choice, it is one of the fastest and most reliable, and they also process about 60% of all education credential assessments. If you're new to this whole process of education credential assessment, generally, WES is your safest and fastest option. However, if you have unique circumstances, especially when the province you're applying to for permanent residency or work specifically requires an ICAS evaluation, you have to go for what is required. Moving on to ICAS, which means International Qualifications Assessment Service. The processing time for ICAS evaluation could take up to 30 business days after your document arrive at your desk. Some people and data says that it could take as little as 15 days to complete your credential evaluation with them. So in most cases, some people might choose it over WES. Moving on to the cost of ICAS evaluation, it costs around 230 Canadian dollars. That's about $37 cheaper than WES. To some people, it doesn't really matter, but to some people, $37 might be a lot of money. So you want to consider that when you're making your choice. Now, why do people go for the ICAS instead of WES? In provinces like Alberta, they specifically request for ICAS because it is run and managed by that province. So if you have the option of Alberta for your permanent residency, study, or working in that province, you might want to use the ICAS evaluation. In Quebec, for example, for their skilled worker stream, they prefer to use their own evaluation process. And so provinces like Alberta having their own evaluation service isn't really new. So if you're targeting Alberta or any other province, you want to check and research to know whether they prefer a certain credential evaluation service over the other. But generally, WES is accepted by everybody. Next, I'll be talking about the International Credential Assessment Service, that is ICAS, ICAS. For their processing times, it takes about 25 business days after your documents lands their desk. For the cost, they are closer to WES, but you can confirm from their website. I'm going to drop the link to all of these websites in the description box. So you'll be looking around the range of $250 to $300 range. Why do people go for this particular credential evaluation service? The ICAS ICAS provides reports that helps with employment, your study, your permanent residency and settlement, and also community agencies helping them to understand your foreign education. So in all of this, ICAS ICAS is like the middle child of the three of them. It's not as fast as ICAS IQAS, and is not as popular as WES. Or maybe if you want a more detailed explanation or evaluation of your foreign degree, but generally people just go for WES. Here are the downsides to the three of them. For WES, they can be very strict. If you have a 2-year master's from certain countries like India, Pakistan, or maybe a distant learning degree, WES might evaluate it as a bachelor's degree or a postgraduate diploma. So in this case, if you are from those countries and you use WES, it will probably bring your CRS score down. So you want to research the applicable situations to the country you reside in. Now for ICAS, IQAS, one of the major advantages is that it deals with complex degree situations. For example, if you evaluated with WES and you're getting a lower CRS score, for example, the case I just mentioned, where you have a 2 years master's degree or your distant learning degree, if your score goes lower than expected, when you use ICAS IQAS, it's going to evaluate it and recognize points as it should for each of those evaluations. So sometimes ICAS might give you higher points than WES. The downside is that they can be slower than WES. So if you want to trade points for speed, whichever is more important to you, you can go for ICAS IQAS. Moving on to ICAS, it is also accepted in provinces like Ontario. And it's also a great catch for trade certificates and tech certifications. The only downside is the speed. They are very slow. As a matter of fact, out of the three of them, ICAS ICAS is the slowest amongst the three. So if you're working in regulated occupations like trade or other regulated occupations that require licensing, you can use ICAS ICAS. Other than that, if you're using it for just express entry, you have to skip this one and either go for WES or ICAS, IQAS. Now, some of the most common questions that people ask regarding these education credential assessments is, do Canadian employers really care about if you use WES or ICAS? To be honest, most Canadian employers care about your skills and your Canadian work experience. These education credential assessments are either used for IRCC purposes or specific government jobs. For example, if you're applying to jobs in government of Alberta and you have a foreign degree, you will need to submit an ICAS evaluation report, similar to other provinces as well, like Ontario. The next question is, what if you're applying for a study visa? Your best bet here is WES. Just go for WES. Do the course by course evaluation by WES. I have a video where I talked about the course by course evaluation versus the document by document evaluation by WES, the difference and which one you need for immigration and for study. Lastly, one of the most common questions people ask is, can I switch from WES to ICAS even after I have done my WES evaluation? The answer is absolutely yes, you can. You can switch from WES to ICAS. If WES had done an evaluation for you and it reduced your score, you can definitely move on to ICAS to do a new evaluation so that it will improve your score. The only thing there is you need to pay another fee to ICAS for that evaluation. Here are some of the action points that I would recommend. There is a WES degree equivalency tool that's online. It's free, where you can go and upload a copy of your document just to see how much score they will give to you. It's totally free. You don't have to pay for it. I'm going to put a link to that tool in the description box. Next step is to contact your university or your college back home and confirm whether they send your transcript to WES digitally or via mail. If it has to be through email, it's going to be faster for your processing. But if they have to mail it via courier to WES, it might take longer. So you want to confirm that from your school. One of the fastest ways to get your evaluation done is to get your documents sent to WES digitally from your school. Otherwise, the processing time might be longer than anticipated. And lastly, if you need speed and just want a standard degree evaluation, go for WES. Go and create your WES account. If you have seen this video this far and I have saved you from the ambiguities surrounding these three organizations and their education credential assessment, please click on the subscribe button. I drop weekly videos sharing insights on how to succeed and thrive as an international student here in Canada. Thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, bye for now.